This is Commercial Transformation, the podcast exploring how modern businesses redesign their commercial systems to scale, adapt, and perform. From strategy to execution, structure to flow, we break down what actually drives sustainable growth. Produced by B10.
Most businesses don't have a growth problem. They have a systems problem that looks like a growth problem. They hire more salespeople, they run more campaigns, they spend more on ads, and for a period, the numbers move. But ultimately, they plateau. Or the quality of what you're winning drops. Or the cost of acquiring each customer quietly creeps up until the unit economics stop making sense. And somewhere in a board meeting or a leadership conversation, someone says, we need to fix our sales process. Or we need a better marketing strategy. And that's where they get it wrong. Because the thing that's broken isn't one part of the business. It's the way all the parts connect, or more accurately, the way they don't. That's what this episode is about. What commercial transformation actually is, why so many organizations misunderstand it, and what it takes to build a commercial system that doesn't just perform, but compounds. We're operating in an environment where the commercial landscape has structurally shifted. Buyers are better informed, less loyal, and harder to reach than they were a decade ago. Decision-making cycles are longer, committees are bigger, and the tolerance for generic, high-friction commercial experiences is essentially zero. At the same time, the marketing tools available to commercial teams have never been more powerful. CRM platforms, marketing automation, revenue intelligence, AI-assisted outreach. Data infrastructure that would have cost millions to build 15 years ago is now accessible to a business of 20 people or less. So here's the paradox. More capability, more access, more data than ever before. And yet the majority of businesses are still running on commercial operations that are fragmented, reactive, and largely disconnected from their own strategy. Research from Gartner consistently shows that less than a third of B2B organizations describe their commercial functions as genuinely integrated. Marketing and sales are largely operating in parallel rather than in sequence. Customer success, if it exists at all, is often an afterthought rather than a designed part of the revenue model. And the cost of that misalignment isn't just theoretical. It shows up in longer sales cycles, in higher customer acquisition costs, in churn that could have been prevented, and in growth that stalls at the exact moment it should be accelerating. That's the environment we're working in, and it's precisely why commercial transformation, if done properly, is one of the most consequential investments a business can make right now. Let me tell you what commercial transformation is not. It's not a rebrand. It's not a new website. It's not a CRM migration, and it's not hiring a revenue director or bringing in a growth marketing agency. Those things can be part of transformation, but on their own, they're not transformation. They are optimization. And there is a critical difference. Optimization makes something you already have work slightly better. Transformation changes what you have, the structure, the model, the way the machine actually works. The core misconception I see most often across startups, scale-ups, and mid-market businesses is this. The commercial performance is a function of individual team capability or individual tool quality. If the sales team is underperforming, hire better salespeople. If leads are poor quality, get a better marketing tool. If retention is low, improve the product. These interventions aren't wrong, but they are addressing symptoms, not the cause. And when you address a symptom without resolving the underlying structural issue, one of two things happens. Either the problem returns, often worse than before, or you create a new problem somewhere else in the system. I've worked with businesses that genuinely had world-class individual performers in their commercial teams, operating inside broken commercial systems. And the system beat them every time. The best salesperson in the world cannot consistently close revenue when the leads arriving in their pipeline are the wrong profile, when there's no clear value proposition they can anchor to, and when the handoff from marketing created expectations that the product doesn't meet. That's not a people problem. That is an architecture problem. So, if individual tools and individual people aren't the root cause, then what is? In my experience, it comes down to three structural failures that compound each other. The first is a lack of commercial architecture, by which I mean there is no designed intentional system connecting how a business attracts attention, earns consideration, converts that consideration into revenue, and retains and expands that revenue over time. Instead, what you find is a collection of activities, some of which work well, many of which don't, with no coherent logic holding them together. The website was built to look good, not to convert. The CRM was set up to track activity, not to support decision making. The sales process was documented once 3 years ago and hasn't been updated since the market changed. Marketing is measured on leads, sales is measured on closed revenue, and nobody is accountable for what happens between the two. The second failure is misaligned go-to-market operating model. This is the how. How does the business actually take its offer to the market? Who is the ideal customer? What is the most efficient channel to reach them? What is the commercial motion? Is this a product-led model, a sales-led model, or a partnership-led model? And critically, does the answer to that question match the way the team is actually structured and resourced? What I typically find is that businesses' go-to-market model was defined, consciously or not, by the founder's personal network, or by the first few deals that closed. And as the business scaled, the model was never revisited. So you have a sales-led motion that made sense when the founder was in every deal, now being run by a team of 8 without the same relationship capital or market credibility. The third failure is commercial capability gaps. Not skills gaps in isolation, but gaps in the shared capabilities the organization needs to execute its commercial model consistently. Qualification disciplines, messaging clarity, commercial negotiation, objection handling that's grounded in real market intelligence, not optimism. These aren't soft skills. They are commercial infrastructure. And when these three failures stack, no architecture, misaligned operating model, capability gaps, you get what most founders describe as unpredictable revenue. Some months are great, but some months will be terrible. The businesses can't identify why, It can't replicate what worked, and it can't diagnose what broke. That unpredictability is the product of structural failure, not bad luck. So, what is commercial transformation, if not the individual fixes we just talked about? Here's the reframe I'd offer. Commercial transformation is the deliberate redesign of how a business creates, delivers, and captures commercial value across the full revenue lifecycle. Not a project, not a campaign, a redesign. And the word I want to focus on is system. A commercial system is a set of integrated, designed components that work together to reliably produce a defined commercial outcome. It is not a collection of tools. It is not a team structure. It is an architecture built intentionally with clear inputs, clear outputs, and clear mechanisms connecting them. Think of it this way. A building is not just bricks and glass. It's an engineered structure where every component has a function, and those functions are coordinated. Remove one structural element carelessly, and the others are compromised. Add a new wing without considering the foundations, and the whole building is at risk. Commercial systems work the same way. When we talk about commercial transformation, we're talking about three integrated pillars. Pillar one would be revenue architecture, the design of how value flows through the business, from first touch to closed deal, from onboarding to renewal and expansion, how each stage connects, what the customer experiences at each point, and what the economics look like across the life cycle. Pillar two would be go-to-market operating model, the strategic and operational choices about who you serve, how you reach them, and how your team is structured and resourced to execute that model consistently, not just when conditions are favorable. Pillar three would be commercial capabilities, the skills, the processes, and the shared disciplines that allow the people inside the system to perform at the level the model requires. Not theory, applied commercial competence that can be measured, developed, and held to account. These three pillars are interdependent. Strengthen one without addressing the others, and you will hit a ceiling. Align all three, and you create a commercial system that compounds. One where every improvement makes the whole thing more efficient, more scalable, and more resilient. Let me make this concrete. Picture a B2B SaaS business, 40 employees, 3 million in annual recurring revenue. Growing, but the growth is inconsistent. The founder is still involved in the majority of deals. The sales team is closing some opportunities, but the win rate has been declining for 18 months. Customer churn is higher than it should be at this stage, and the business is spending more on customer acquisition than it's comfortable with. The instinct, or the natural instinct, I should say, is to hire a more experienced sales leader, run more targeted campaigns, maybe bring in a consultant to fix the sales process. But when you look at the system, a different picture emerges. The website is generating volume, but it's attracting the wrong profile. The ICP, or the ideal customer profile, was defined 18 months ago when the product was different and the market was different. It hasn't been updated, so leads arrive in the pipeline with expectations that the product doesn't meet. The CRM has data in it, but it isn't being used to drive decisions. No pipeline hygiene, no consistent qualification criteria. Deals live in the pipeline for months with no clear status. The sales forecast is largely guesswork. Sound familiar? The onboarding process was designed when the product was simpler. It hasn't kept pace with the product complexity, so customers are arriving feeling overwhelmed, underserved, and disengaged. And somewhere around month 4, they start questioning whether the investment was worth it. And critically, marketing, sales, and customer success are operating as separate functions with separate objectives, separate metrics, and no shared accountability for the commercial outcome. This business doesn't need a better salesperson. It needs its commercial system rebuilt. Start with the ICP. Redefine it based on current product capabilities and current market reality. Rebuild the messaging around that profile. Redesign the website to attract and qualify that profile before a human being gets involved. Fix the CRM to reflect a real commercial process, one that supports qualification, forecasting, and decision making. Give the team shared criteria for what a good deal looks like. Redesign the onboarding experience so customers reach value faster. Define what success looks like for the customer at 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Build the touch points that ensure they get there. And create a shared commercial rhythm across marketing, sales, and customer success. So the whole team is aligned on the same metrics, the same priorities, and the same outcome. That is commercial transformation. Not a project, a redesign of the whole system. So, if you're sitting with this and thinking, how do I actually approach this? Here's the framework I use. 5 stages. I call it the commercial engine rebuild. Stage 1, commercial audit. Always start here. Before anything changes, you need an honest picture of what's actually happening across the commercial system. Not what the deck says, not what the founder believes, what the data, the process reality, and the customer experience actually reflect. Where are the leaks? Where is value being created? And where is it being destroyed? Stage 2, revenue architecture design. Based on a commercial audit, you design the commercial model that the business actually needs, not the one it inherited. This means defining the revenue lifecycle, the commercial motion, the ICP, the value proposition architecture, and the commercial metrics that will govern the performance. Stage 3, the go-to-market alignment. You align the organization, the structure, resources, incentives, processes with a designed model. This is where most transformation efforts fail. They design a new model and then try to run it with the same operating structure. It doesn't work. The structure has to serve the model. Stage 4, system rebuild and integration. This is where the infrastructure comes in. The CRM, the website, the automations, the data architecture, the marketing stack. These are not starting points. They are the outputs of strategy. They are built to serve the model, not the other way around. And stage 5, capability uplift and commercial rhythm. The best system in the world underperforms with a team that doesn't know how to use it. This final stage is about building the commercial disciplines, the shared cadence, and management rhythm that allows the organization to run the new system consistently and improve it over time. These 5 stages are not sequential in a rigid sense. They overlap, they iterate, but the logic of sequence matters. You cannot build the right system without first understanding what's broken. You cannot align the organization without first knowing what model you're aligning to. Sequence is strategy. I want to spend a moment on what happens when organizations don't address this, not as a scare tactic, but because the cost of inaction is real and it compounds quietly in ways that aren't always visible until significant damage has been done. The first cost is market position. Commercial systems that don't evolve fall behind the velocity of the market. Your competitors, and I don't necessarily mean larger competitors, often smaller and more agile ones, are rebuilding their systems. They are reaching your ideal customers faster, qualifying them more efficiently, and creating commercial experiences that yours cannot match. That gap widens slowly, and then suddenly. The second cost is organizational drag. A fragmented commercial system creates friction at every point between marketing and sales, between sales and delivery, between customer success and the rest of the business. That friction is expensive, and it shows up in wasted headcount, in management time spent firefighting, in decisions made with incomplete information. It's a tax on execution. Third cost is founder dependency. Many businesses, particularly at the scale-up stage, are still commercially dependent on their founder. The founder is in every key deal. The founder's network is the primary pipeline. The founder's credibility is the primary reason customers buy. That is not a scalable commercial system. It is a single point of failure. And it traps the founder in the business, making every other strategic decision harder. The businesses that commit to commercial transformation, that rebuild the engine rather than tune it, are the ones that create genuine scale. Not growth that requires constant founder intervention or constant cost injection. Compounding, systematic growth. The kind that creates enterprise value. I've spent the last several years building and rebuilding commercial systems across businesses at very different stages. Early stage startups finding product market fit, growth stage businesses trying to break through a scaling ceiling, more established organizations trying to modernize commercial operations that worked in a different era. And what I've come to understand is that commercial transformation is not a single discipline. It sits at the intersection of strategy, operations, technology, and human capability. You can't approach it as a technology project, or a process improvement project, or even a sales training initiative. It requires thinking across the whole system simultaneously. That's what B10 was built to do. Not to be another agency or consultancy that optimizes one part of your commercial operation, but to rebuild the whole commercial engine from first click to recurring revenue as an integrated, coherent system. That's the work, that's the practice, and this podcast is where we go deep on the thinking, the frameworks, and the real decisions behind it. Before I close this episode, I want to leave you with something practical. Wherever your business is right now, whatever stage, whatever sector, ask yourself one question. Is your commercial performance the result of a designed system or the result of accumulated activity? If it's the former, if you can clearly articulate how your commercial engine works, how each part connects to the next, and what the design logic is, then you're in a strong position and the work is optimization. If it's the latter, if the honest answer is that you're generating revenue but can't fully explain why, or you're struggling with the ceiling, that more activity isn't breaking through, then what we've talked about today is worth taking seriously. If you'd like a conversation about where your commercial system is today and what transformation could look like in your context, not a sales call or a pitch, just a structured diagnostic conversation, reach out through the B10 website. The link is in the show notes. It's also b10hub.com, b10hub.com. These conversations are confidential, they're focused, and they're genuinely useful, regardless of what you decide to do next. That's it for episode 1. In the next episode, we're going to go deeper on revenue architecture, specifically how to design a revenue model that compounds rather than stalls. We'll look at the structural decisions that separate businesses that scale efficiently from those that grow by adding costs. Until then.
You've been listening to Commercial Transformation, produced by B10. If this episode was useful, follow the podcast for future conversations on building better commercial systems.